Hey guys, welcome back to Creating Careers Podcast. On today's episode, I had a chance to sit down and talk with Hank Washington. Hank is an incredible creative. He's an illustrator, he's a graphic designer. He's based currently in the Atlanta area, but did at one point work in the Birmingham area as well. Hank is such a great person and really an incredible creative. He's created these really unique looking characters. He calls them Fuzzies, and these Fuzzies are really amazing in their unique aesthetics as well as their variety of applications. And I know that may not make sense, but when you see these things and you hear this conversation, I think it really will make sense, and you'll see the beauty behind Hank's designs. But without further ado, I really am excited to share this conversation with you. I think you'll greatly enjoy it. Check it out. Hank Washington, thank you so much for joining me on Creating Careers Podcast today. And I guess I should maybe, do you just go by the name Fuzzies, or is that more of like your sort of your brand?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter. It's just Fuzzy's code just to kind of make it easier for the search bar. But no, most times I go by Hank. I haven't run
Yeah.
into anyone that was like, what's up, Fuzzies? So it's like, all right.
Well, that's what I was imagining, is that like potentially people would just be referring to you as Fuzzies. I even trying to get this ready. I didn't know, should I be putting Fuzzies in there or just Hank Washington. So, but Hank, I really do appreciate you joining me today. It's an honor, and I look forward to this conversation. Seriously.
Oh, absolutely, man. I'm super appreciative of just being considered and happy to get into whatever we're gonna talk about today for sure.
I like it. Well, listen, I think I'm trying to remember who it was exactly that recommended you. I should have gone back and actually researched my own clips to remember who that was. What kind of experience do you have specifically in the Birmingham area? Did you at some point work in the Birmingham area?
Yeah, and I think the person you referred to is Chris Shinara. He was
Yeah.
we were coworkers for a while back in Birmingham. But yeah, I was living in Birmingham around 2017 till up about 2020. I was there with an agency that I started with back in Mississippi, and they were rapidly growing super fast, and I had the opportunity to actually watch that and be a part of that growth. And then after a while, we ended up moving to Birmingham because it was just kind of a really, great city. Still a great city at the time, but at that moment, it was really on a rapid growth, and it was just good to be a part of it. Where we got really in tune with the community and started really partnering with some great people. And it was really, honestly, a birth of a lot of just great, design stuff. And where we got connected with Chris, who I've watched come in and become a great designer and just starting to make his own mark, and being able to see that growth all in that area was just, mind blowing. But yeah, Birmingham, that's a stumping ground. I love Birmingham all the way from, just the people, the food. Honestly, the food is always something I miss a lot. And yeah, and just the city's growth and creativity, I think it's been on the rise. I think it's still on the rise. Regardless of like just the the pandemic and everything, and just seeing everyone still being able to thrive and make the city somewhere that people are like looking forward to visiting, and it's becoming more of like another staple in the South that people are like being attracted to.
Yeah, yeah. Birmingham, it's amazed me since I've started this podcast, just the number and really the breadth of like the
Hmm.
creative community. Because when I first started, I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to a couple of like videographers,
Yeah.
maybe get a little bit into like the graphic design and things like that. But
Hmm.
then it's like the animation, the film,
Yeah.
the music side of things,
Hmm.
like the creative industry in the Birmingham area is just so much bigger than I ever imagined. and so much more talented than I ever thought. Considering you just didn't. I mean, you think of like Nashville, you think of Atlanta,
Hmm.
sort of the more of a hotbed of that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But man, Birmingham's extremely talented, and I would say very kind to me right now. Like people just keep saying yes, and I don't know why, but I'm thankful they do. And but I knew you had a connection to Birmingham, and like I said, I
Hmm.
should have done some more research into my own stuff rather than just sticking with what I was trying to learn your story a little bit. But
Oh no, you're
um,
good. You're
yeah,
good.
but I knew it was somebody. I couldn't remember, but Chris is definitely a talented guy, and
100%.
yeah, he's a good guy too. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into your story. Like, who is Hank Washington? Tell me, like, where did you grow up? I know currently you're living in Atlanta, I believe, but
Hmm.
where were you born? Tell me, sort of like those early years for you, your origin story, so to speak.
Yeah. All right, just make a long story a little bit longer. No, but I was born and raised in Columbus, Mississippi. So this is roughly the east side of Mississippi. So I was about 5 minutes from like the Alabama state line. So my family was kind of split up between Alabama and Mississippi. So I was kind of like on the east side, especially when it comes to college football. So it was like a little bit in between. But yeah, I grew up there. I was born and raised. And I, kind of grew up normal, like, mom, dad, brother, went to school and everything. And I was an athlete for a long time where I played a lot of basketball, a little bit of football, a little bit of baseball. And I was kind of in the space, like, when you getting out of high school, you starting to figure out like kind of what was, what's next. And I honestly didn't have a clue. So, I ended up, just working a little bit. And I had a friend of my brother's, which my brother, he's much older than I am. Not much older, I'm sorry. He's gonna sound like he's old when he hears this, but he was older than I was, and he was already like, past school and everything. But a friend of his used to have this blog that I love, and this was like around the time when MySpace was kind of out there. People were checking like their old what was it, like Bebo, like the old social media. When social media was literally on its like cusp, like right before it
Yeah,
started becoming like that big space.
you're
Um,
showing your age a little bit there,
I know,
and
man.
mine too, because I know what you're talking about.
Man, I know. It's probably somebody on here like, what's a Bebo? It's like, what? But Bebo was like your, I don't know. It was like your profile before like profiles was a thing. It was just like you used to go to people's pages, see themes, all this stuff. But anyway, this is like where the blog era was really coming out. I think this was around like 2010, 2011, around that time. And a friend of mine, he was actually a designer, and he was in this space, and he was actually like working here in Atlanta for a while. And he used to have a blog that I used to love to check out. And this was like where I used to go find new music, hear about like new like creative trends that were just happening. And a lot of it I didn't understand, but I just loved seeing it. And the experience of like going to this blog was pretty cool. And doing it for a while, and I got curious. I asked my brother one time. I was like, "Hey, this is really cool. Like, I want to like do something like this. I don't know if like what it actually is to make this a thing." And he was like, "Yeah, that's graphic design." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds cool." I was like, that'd be something I kind of look into a little bit more. So I started to like watch YouTube videos and just starting to see it a lot more when I understood it, kind of what that industry was. And at the time, I just decided to end up going to school for design, where I ended up going to Mississippi State, and had an opportunity to study there, and made some great friends and just great connections there. And it was very challenging because it was the industry was a space that I wasn't familiar with at all. Like it was, it's most people, they kind of have a little bit of a little bit experience, or at least more knowledge of like an industry before they actually go into it, or like they may have someone in their family or someone like a parent or anything that may have done the same thing. But for me, it was completely new. So it was challenging, but I was super grateful to be in the space because it was becoming an opportunity to start to like push the creative side of things. um
Were you already like an artist at all? Were you, I mean, did you sketch, doodle, like more so than like the average person, or was all of that even new to you?
It was. I was a little bit of creative. My brother, to me, was like the creative of the family because I used to always like steal his sketchbooks and color in them, and then he used to be like, he used to hate it. But he was really more the bigger inspiration for that because I used to watch him draw, like sometimes the characters that we would watch on TV, or he'll draw some of his classmates and friends. And he was a big hip hop fan, and I watched him draw like these like Busta Rhymes and all these other rappers and stuff. I'm like, this is like epic, and I go and practice. I was in the where you had to draw like the Dragon Ball Z characters and things like that. But I had a little bit of it. It's like I had an understanding of like how to sketch, but getting into the industry or like going to school for it, they kind of push you to a very uncomfortable level, but it was worth it. It's very much worth it. But I got a chance to do that for a while, and from there, closer to I guess kind of the midway point of school, I ended up finding an opportunity to intern with a studio that was socially in, and they were out of Mississippi as well. So shout out to Keith and Adrian at the time. They was kind of a young, hungry company, and this is kind of the introduction into like entrepreneurship because coming in, if anyone's listening has been a creative in a startup, you know that it's not like you have like a specific role or like a very specific duty. It's more of like, hey, this is a creative opportunity. How do we actually get this done? And it was a lot of early mornings, late nights, working there. But it was great because the relationship with the company and relationship with the team was much different than your average company. We were able to actually hang out, and they taught me the ropes of just like what it means to actually advertise. How do you be in front of people, and how do you actually like be of service? How do you make people trust you as not only a person but as a brand and everything else? So being able to work there for as long as I did, and being able to help them grow in a way that allowed them to scale and bring on more people was super awesome. And we was in Starkville, so where I was going to school in Mississippi State, that's in Starkville, Mississippi, and we were able to kind of like build a great relationship around the city. And then over time, it was like, all right, let's go somewhere where we can actually grow and scale, and that's where we ended up moving into Birmingham. And that was kind of where Birmingham started to become, that hub and everything else as well. And got a chance to scale there and meet some great people, work with some great people, and even just bringing more people on the team that's actually having opportunities that projected their career much further than we could at the time. And it was super awesome. Then over time, I ended up going independent and moving to Atlanta, and then the rest has been history.
That's cool. Well, I mean, we'll forgive you for the Mississippi State stuff, but other than now, but I was going to say you brought up the idea of you and your brother, I think, or maybe your brother specifically, like sketching some of the characters that you were seeing on TV.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring up one a piece that you've created that reminds me of my childhood. And so I'm curious to know, because I don't know your age. You don't have to tell me your age, but I'm 41, and this definitely was like the epitome of my childhood, especially like my older kid years. All right, so Skeeter. I don't, now, are you a fan of Doug and Skeeter, or is this just more of like, he looks cool?
Yeah, so that's funny. So that's one of those things where I've was a very young kid hanging around a bunch of adults, and weirdly enough, of the adults I hung out with love cartoons. So
Oh
Doug
yeah.
was one of those cartoons that was I used to watch a lot, and it was really a big inspiration. But Skater, yeah, he was one of those characters that really stood out to me. And Doug, I don't know, there was something about the Doug show that kind of like felt comfortable to me. Like it
Yeah.
was, I don't know if it was like the theme song, like the beatboxing, something in the background, and just the way that the characters were set up. I thought it was just kind of unique because it was very colorful, but it wasn't like so much in your face type thing. It was very comfortable to watch.
Yeah.
But no, Skeeter was definitely one of those characters. One, it was just the outfit for me. I was like,
Oh, he was the sort of the fly guy of
yeah,
that era of cartoons. Definitely, I
a
felt
hundred
like.
percent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I have a little bit of a trivia for you,
I
okay?
got
To
you.
see how much of a Skeeter fan you are.
Oh
Do you know
man.
his real name?
Oh, wait. Um, yes, because there's an episode that was it a teacher that called it out? It was like somebody called out his name. Um, oh man.
It's a good. I mean, Skeeter basically alludes to it in and of itself. It's like a. I wouldn't say it's an abbreviated version because it's almost just as long, but it's like another name for this. Some people, especially in the South, probably.
Oh man. Oh man, you got to tell me.
All right. It's
I know I've heard it, but you got to tell
last
me.
name. Last name is Valentine.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's Valentine.
First name Mosquito.
Mosquito. Oh man.
I thought that was awesome. Like even his name's sort of cool. I mean, I mean, granted, in the South, we know mosquitoes are not our friends,
Yeah.
but this guy definitely made Skeeter and mosquito a cooler name in general. So
That is funny. It's funny. Mosquito is actually like to me it feels like a funnier name than like Skeeter. Like yeah,
I
what's
agree. I agree. Yeah, yeah. Well, I know, like for somebody to be called mosquito would be sort of weird, but
yeah.
Skeeter's a cool name.
Yeah,
So,
it is. It is. No,
well,
he's
listen,
legendary.
I want to know about your creative journey because I know, like you said, you sort of you went to college, obviously for graphic design.
Hmm.
We see sort of some of the work that you sort of the whole idea
Hmm.
of Fuzzies now, which
Hmm.
we'll get into later. But I want to know like how did you go from sort of working at this startup to to sort of fine tuning your
Hmm.
style, I guess, or finding your style. I'm curious to know like um, that journey that you went on, especially
Hmm.
now because I do feel like your style is very recognizable.
Thank
You've
you.
definitely sort of found a niche that you fit in, and also it's so adaptable. And again, we'll talk about the fuzzies later. But just in general, what was that journey like for you? What was the creative process that you sort of went through to fine tune your style?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, when I was, transitioning to the company that I started with, it was very challenging in a way that, as a creative lead or just kind of specifically from like a skill set, you're pushed into a lot of different realms of styles and just kind of types of design. Especially like when you work with agencies who have a lot of different clients, at scale for a lot of larger agencies, you have people who work on very specific accounts. So, you may have a team for, company A and another team for company B. But when you're in a smaller company, especially a startup, you are pretty much touching almost everything to some degree. Um, but when I was studying and kind of like practicing a lot of design, working on different clients and even for my job and even independently, like outside of work, you get pulled into different realms of like people's styles and preferences that early on you may not necessarily know how to decipher what is like good from a strategic level, but you start to really experiment on a lot of different things. So for me, I was learning a lot of techniques, and this is like when YouTube tutorials was really starting to become a big thing. Especially if you're a designer, I'm pretty sure there's a technique that you had to go on YouTube and search for. Like it's very hard to just stumble upon something very specific. Um, but doing it for a long time, you start to kind of explore things and you pick up on like principles and techniques that you can kind of like say, hey, this worked here, but let me experiment with this like in somewhere else. So as I was working there and being able to do that, I was starting to take some of those things into my own, personal work. And I was following a bunch of great artists that were, really making and still making, amazing work at the time, and just honestly kind of like copying, but with a, complimentary, like in a very like kind of nice way, not necessarily to like steal it or anything, but I wanted to learn like how they do those specific things. So over time, I was taking techniques from work. I was kind of like watching YouTube and watching just videos and tutorials of how people make their certain styles and just trying it to see like what it actually how it comes about. And then what you realize, you start seeing like, I know how to accomplish this look, but doing it this type of way. And then you just kind of mix in, try different things, and over time you start to see like a pattern in the way that you kind of want to produce the work that you want to show off. And this is I was really battling a lot of like if it made sense to niche in a certain style or niche in a certain like technique or space. And this was kind of the balance between like being a generalist and being a specialist, which both had their pros and cons, right? But I was trying it, and I was like, if I'm going to niche, I'd rather niche into something that has a general feeling across the board versus niche into something very specific. Just because everything just felt interesting to me to try, or at least be able to provide to someone one day. So I started to kind of hone in on this principle. It's like I want everything to feel as vibrant as it can be. Hopefully, it feels kind of bold and really, and colorful in essence, and hopefully, it kind of like gives like this sense of kind of not necessarily happiness, but I don't know, just like energy to some degree. So kind of keeping that in mind, I just kind of applied that principle to different techniques. So being able to, again, take different skills, different, tools and everything else, just kind of applying it to different mediums, really help ultimately like kind of define that style a little bit more. And then of course with time, you start to fine tune it, and you can kind of say like this is starting to veer away from something that I'm used to doing, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But now I can make a judgment call and say like, all right, do I share this or put this out as kind of a different style, or do I tweak it and kind of make it part of the family as a whole, so that when you're looking at every piece of work, you can kind of say, okay, I can see the relationship between these two things, which is kind of a great, I guess, fork in the road to be at, to be able to kind of make things that's unique to your specific style, but also you can kind of push the envelope and say, okay, now if I'm doing this for myself, maybe I can decide a little more, but if I'm doing it for someone else, we can kind of break the mold a little bit and be a little bit more, you know, creative, pun intended.
How much was the sort of like that initial Fuzzies design? How much of that was happenstance, and how much of it was intentional?
Oh man, it's I'll probably say like 30-70 as far as
Okay.
like 30-70 as far as that. With it was funny. So when I was designing, I was doing a lot of just general graphic design work, kind of branding and things like that. And I wanted to get back into illustration because I stepped away for so long, and I was like, I want to kind of do something to kind of relax my brain a little bit, where it's not necessarily a lot of like strategic thinking or anything like that. It was just like, all right, now I can just make something and bring, this visual I've been thinking about to life, or reinterpret, some of the things I've been seeing in my own way. So I got into it, and I was, starting to get back into doing illustration, but I was, I'm lazy at heart. Like I don't think about working too hard if I don't have to. But at the time, I wanted to do something that was like, all right, what's a technique I can repeat, kind of like over and over again, to like really build like a library of stories. Because I was following, illustrators like or just really designers and creators like Timmy Coker. He's on Instagram, and like Rhymes Like Dimes. They was like amazing illustrators to me, and I was like, I want to kind of build a library of these illustrations just like them. So I was going in, I started to like draw these characters. Mosquito was actually one of those early samples of just trying to get back into it and just kind of like find like a unique interpretation of things. And that's with that style and kind of texture, that was kind of the happenstance. I was just kind of messing with different brushes and trying different things and using like these pops of color. But over time, I started to become very intentional and build characters with these anatomy that people can recognize, and that
Yeah.
people can continue to associate and things like that. And it made it much easier, so I could focus more on the story, or at least the character themselves, versus like worrying too much about the anatomy. It's like, okay, we can keep these pieces simple and keep these elements consistent across the board. Then I can just focus on like, all right, I don't want to worry about like how too much how the characters look, but let's focus on what the character is doing. Like, what's the style around these elements that would keep it consistent, that make this character unique, and it just gives me freedom to like build something that feels, um, hopefully feels unique. Hopefully helps people feel good when they're watching, and kind of have a space where people can ultimately see themselves. Because a lot of the work is inspired by these people in my life. I tend to take inspiration from like a lot of black women because they wear their hair in such a unique and beautiful way, and it's like I see that and I'm like, all right, this is like great inspiration to not only represent them and hopefully honor them, but being able to have like these characters have their own type of attitude that people can resonate with and be attracted to.
Yeah, I do love the fact that all of yours, although stand unique in and of themselves, like
Hmm.
each of the characters, but at the same time, I mean, literally, there's times where you post them all together, or even just looking at your Instagram grid, it matches across the board. Like there is that similar feeling
Hmm.
that you get from each one of them. So I mean, props to you. I think it's great. I really do. So let's talk about the fuzzies. Let's break down some of those elements you're talking about. Like, what are some of those consistent pieces that you've learned? Like, this is part of what a fuzzy really is.
Yeah, so the big thing, and it's funny, like I'm looking at these pieces, like you bring like some nostalgia back. I'm like, man, I miss those, I miss those pieces. Um, but so the big call out is definitely the texture. I think that really was kind of the big kind of attraction point. And for me, I wanted to make these characters or just this type of style feel like something you could almost touch.
Yeah.
Like if you're looking at it, you can kind of feel that fuzziness, so to say.
Right.
But I was lucky enough. I had actually had a friend of mine. It was a client at the time, and she was, getting praise about the characters, and we were having a conversation. And this is like early on when I was first starting, and she was like, "Man, these feel like very fuzzy," and I was like, "Yeah, they do." And I was, I was like, "Okay, that's interesting." And I sat there for a while. I was like, "I actually love that name. Like, it does feel fuzzy. Like, let's just own it. Like, see how we can like make that actual thing." So yeah, we ended up on the style, but yeah, the texture is kind of the biggest call out for this. At this time, the specific style was more of like pushing out those elements that we can typically would see them as part of like the background, so to say. And I say that in air quotes. But like for example, with Skeeter, like he always had those patches on his knees, those red patches. I'm
Yeah.
like, let's bring those out. Like let's make those elements like be a part of the scene versus like part of the background. And then kind of owning that type of technique kind of helps bring these characters out in a new light. And ultimately, it kind of gives them kind of another level of recognition of just kind of being able to like say how important these characters were to me. And being able to like have them in this environment that kind of points out the uniqueness of these characters, because we see them all the time on TV, we see them all the time on our phones and videos, but if you ever like go in and actually like draw these characters, you start to pay attention to details that we typically ignore. Like I know like drawing characters like Garfield, or characters like I don't know, like Super Mario or something like that. Like seeing them, like I'm like, all right, great, that's Super Mario. But when I have to draw like the buttons on his pants, I'm paying attention to that character in a whole different way. So with this, I wanted to kind of like pull out those elements and kind of make it kind of more of a pop art type thing to show like how much the details matter, and that's what makes these characters stand out the way that they do, at least to me, and hopefully to anyone else that's kind of watching the work come to life.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say they're called fuzzies, and it seems like you've gone through maybe some iterations or some evolutions in the texture itself, because
Yeah,
when I pull up some more modern ones or some of your
yeah.
more recent work, a lot of those have almost like a glossy, almost like a
Mhm.
balloon type texture to them. So,
Yeah.
but now we also sort of see a little bit more of a consistency even of some
Hmm.
of those characteristics you were talking about earlier, especially
Hmm.
whenever we talk about certain features or shapes to the anatomy. So talk through some of these things that are now more consistent in your characters.
Yeah, so this is the evidence I was touching on before about, like, starting to give these characters features that can be consistent throughout, and then you can focus more on the story and the detail. So over time, I wanted to start, really just owning the style of characters that I was putting out. Because at first I wanted, of course, create like these fun renditions of these characters that already exist. That's the Skeeter, like the LeBron James, and all this as well, which was really for me a great gateway to get back into it. Like, I didn't have to think too much. I was like, all right, this is a great moment in time, a great moment in history. Let me put out my interpretation of that, and then have that become, like, something I can kind of be proud of. But over time I really wanted to create something that felt more ownable and kind of feel more like unique to itself, and just inspired by those early pieces. So with this, yeah, you start to see we started to evolutionize the mouth and eyes. And before, I was just getting to it. I didn't want to worry about detail too much, because you have the technique of, like, drawing a circle and then the triangles until you get the nose right. You got to make sure the eyes are level a certain way. I was like, I appreciate that technique, but I want to keep this very simple. So I was getting into this, and then again, just kind of putting this anatomy together. And I wanted to put more attention into the type of detail. So it's funny with this. This was actually still the same grain texture, but it's just very fine tuned. So if you were to actually zoom in on, like, these characters, and maybe I'll put more content out there to kind of show that detail, but it's very fine tuned grain, and it feels very glossy. Which, again, that was semi intentional, because when you start to see, I was like, oh, this kind of feels like, these skins can be smooth, have a little bit of a balloon texture. I almost feel like they can pop a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
but doing that, and that kind of allowed me to focus on, practice lighting and experiment with colors to kind of bring, some of these, again, just the same technique, bring some of the details out. And I wanted to just, again, just to feel soft. In school, when we was learning about, like, illustrating, they were on us about, how do you pull out the darkness in scenes and colors. And they didn't allow us to use, like, the color black. Like, we couldn't use it where there was, like, pastels or color pencils or anything like that. It was like, don't use the color black. Like, experiment, mix your colors, see what it feels like to bring out the darkness and shadows of colors, but still keeping it very vibrant. And that technique, I think, kind of stuck with me, because I was like, all right, now I can make things feel like they're in this heavy light or dark light, without making it feel as stark as that. Because I think when you kind of have a little bit of softness, you interpret the actual piece a little bit different, and it allows it to really stand out in a way that feels very unique. But again, the detail itself is just, really fine grained, and allows it to pop. And that kind of helps me focus more on, like, I don't know, just kind of the cleanness of these characters in that style. So, uh, but man, you're taking me back. I haven't I haven't gone through and looked at my profile in a while. I'm like, all right, now I'm inspired to make some more.
Yeah, no, I love it, dude. I love I always love these kind of things where you really sort of take everybody through the process.
Hmm.
But also, like, you're right. Whenever you look closer, you can still see that fuzzy texture.
Hmm.
But I guess, like you said, it's more fine tuned,
Hmm.
and it's neat how it can be fuzzy but yet almost glossy at the same time.
Exactly.
And the way that you play with light, and the way that you add those sort of sheen to it,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's great. And then obviously the animations that you add in on a lot of these, it's a neat touch as well, just in the way
Hmm.
you share it. So how much of this now, like how much of your fuzzies has become like a a business, as far as like,
Hmm.
are you getting like commission to make fuzzies for something, or or is this more of like, this is my sort of escape, and then my paid work is stuff other than fuzzies?
Yeah, so I've been, lucky enough to be able to have some opportunities where these characters, or at least this style itself, has been, part of other like campaigns with businesses. To me, primarily, they mainly focus more on. To me, they're more like the escape because a lot of the paid work and kind of the bread and butter is usually more on the design side, which I love just as much, if not more. But for me, this kind of like lets me explore a different side of creativity to where I can kind of like have some more fun and really test things out. But uh, you know, I'm just grateful for the people that's been out there and been a fan of these and just encouraged me to, continue to make more. But they started to ask like, ways that they can own these pieces and like, how can I have this in, my wall? They want it for their kids. And, we're actually currently working on like kid opportunities. And, I was, me and my wife, we at the time, we were like, hey, we need to start bringing this to the physical world. So what we've done is kind of went in and started to, uh, create like pop-up shops or pop-up booths that we go to events and conferences and just places and start selling like just prints of these. And then we even started like a small online shop to kind of get some people some merchandise and things because as just as well as adults may love it and kind of feel nostalgic and love these pieces, but they also want to get it to their kids and have the kids kind of see themselves in it, just with like the style. So we're still learning a lot about like how to um, build these characters in a way that can resonate and also hopefully down the road educate in a sense. But we started moving into print, so we started giving people posters and small like 10 by 10 posters and like I want to say like 12 by 16 posters that they can have. We did a little bit of merchandise where we have like shirts, a little bit of hoodies that we've tried out. And we're still learning a lot and we're trying to mold into plushies so that we can get, characters you can actually like hold these characters.
That would be
Um,
cool.
yeah, so I'm saying that so I can like hold myself accountable, so I can get these out there. But we've been working and testing some things out for that, and yeah, it's just been demand to make it its own thing, and it's kind of a great escape around the regular design work where we can actually go and travel and bring people into this world, and it's great just to have conversations because people see it online and it just melts me when people say I've been seeing this. Like I'm actually able to see this in person, and it kind of like re-energizes me a little bit more. Okay, like this is not just a hobby, but for some people, like this is becoming a brand, and we just want to kind of continue to fuel that. But for me, it is definitely an escape from the day to day. It just allows me to kind of relax creatively, but it's still a little bit of work, but it's kind of a relaxing work, and then it just allows me to really um, take reflect on just the world that I've been seeing and the people that I've interacted with. It's like I can go and reflect on, hey, I went to the grocery store and I, had a conversation or read, I saw this person. Like, let me use that as inspiration to create the next one and then continue to just again build the library and just kind of see, where the people would like to take it.
Yeah. I do think you have an underrepresentation of bald men in your
Right.
imageries.
You're right. You're 100% right.
I don't think bald works quite as well for your style,
You know
maybe.
what? No, we're gonna make it work. I'm gonna figure it out. Just because you said that, I'm gonna make a ball one. I got
I
you.
like it. I like it. And well, and you mentioned the idea of like kids, and I noticed this that you shared
Yeah.
out. It looks like I don't know. Was this more of like a family event, or is this something that you have started doing often?
So definitely shout out to my wife. She's just an amazing aunt. she's um but she's definitely been kind of helping me lead the charge and really push the narrative towards like, kids being able to draw these characters from themselves. But yeah, that was really kind of a spark of something we were experimenting with. So again, the characters they would I mean sorry, the kids were seeing these characters, then they loved them, and just like activities, we were like, all right, let's give them a template. Like let's make an outline of these characters and let them draw it. Because again, like we talked about before, we're keeping the anatomy the same. We're not changing
Right.
anything with that. But I think for kids, and I'm thinking about myself, just like I remember getting like a stencil or like like, almost like a chia pet. Oh man, I'm telling my age for real. But but a chia pet, and it's like you have this one base thing, but you style around it. So it's like, all right, let's have kids do this on their own. But in this video specifically, they were able to go in, which impressed me. They went in and drew it themselves. But it just, you could just see the creativity, and it allows them to think about things so much more. Um, and just like honestly, they've inspired me to like just to do more as well. But yeah, kids is just, they gravitate to it, and parents love to have them kind of try things for themselves. And I think it's a great introduction to creativity, because again, like,
Yeah.
representation is very, very tough to find, especially now it's in specific spaces. And it's gotten a lot better, but it is challenging. So when you do have the chance to like bring kids into this world of art and creativity, I'm just grateful Fuzzies can be a part of it, and I would love to just continue to do more, just to allow kids and just anybody that's in charge of kids to say, hey, if you want to have this as your part of your toolkit, like, I'm more than happy to allow that, to so that kids can really express themselves. And I always can have that callback to say, I remember making my own fuzzy, back in 2021 when it's only
Yeah.
like 2040, and be like, okay, I can credit that to the creative parts of my life now.
Well, and I love how almost simplistic that structure is. I mean, like you've been talking about the whole time, you sort of found this consistent anatomy that you put into all of the fuzzies,
Hmm.
and the fact that for kids especially, it's like a great starting point, and then from there their creativity can just sort of branch out,
Hmm.
and we see it in these, man. It's a cool thing that you've done there. All right, so we've been talking about nostalgia, so let's talk about that. I love this middle picture. This middle picture is, I'm assuming, where you started. This is like your office space,
Man.
early, right?
Dude, wow, man. I wish I could describe the feeling I have, because I
That's what I
haven't seen
want to
that photo
know.
in so long.
I want to know, like, how does this make you feel looking back at some of your
Man.
early stuff? I'm assuming this is early. I mean, this wasn't
Oh
last
man.
week.
No, man. Sometimes I wish it was last week. Oh man. So yeah, that was real early. And yeah, this was actually around the time I think it's actually the time I was finishing school. But this is me actually learning the entrepreneur side of design. So I'm looking at like some of the stuff on the wall, and like I remember that like bottle, that wine bottle, that was actually a project for school that I was finishing up, that I needed as a reference. But yeah, no, this was definitely a very unique moment in time. This was a very stressful time,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
this was actually in the space where I was finishing up school, but at the same time I was learning a little bit more of like what it means to be independent. So I was, starting to take on personal clients, and really learning how to, manage them, manage myself, and really learn how to pull from different like sources to pull from different sources to actually like create kind of this workflow for myself that allowed me to like ultimately scale. And it's funny, like some of these like side pieces were actually part of that journey that you have here. Like it was very early, and really trying things, but this was definitely a very specific moment in time that was really pivotal. Because I remember going back home, because I think this was actually in Starkville, I believe. It looks like, I think it was in Starkville, but I remember taking this whole setup and bringing it home back into Columbus, and like really building it from there, and then ultimately, having that project into everything now. And like some of these side pieces, like it's funny, that piece on the right was inspired by, I had this old like iPhone that was just like torn to pieces. I don't know how I managed to to keep that phone working, but I was like, this looks like a zombie. So I was like, this is actually me learning Photoshop. And like I was learning it, and I was like, let me just illustrate what it would look like. And my phone just, for some reason, just come to life. you know,
and started attacking you.
it started attacking me. Like I'm gonna create this like scary piece, because yeah, that it was in shambles. And yeah, and then the sweet tea photography, that was actually one of the first and early branding projects I started. So you can definitely see it was it was a big learning curve. going there. But all that, honestly, all that was literally built from that desk and just like being able to sit there and like I'm looking at it and I can remember how that chair felt,
Mm.
like sitting there.
I love being able to look at people's early work. I mean, I'm more in the video space, and
Hmm.
so if you were to search back through my stuff, eventually you'd come to some of those really early videos that were probably shot and edited on
Yeah.
iPhones or an iPad or something like that. Or even if you go back further, you can find some Windows Movie Maker kind of
Oh man.
videos that I've got, but like those early videos and even early projects like this, I think people need to see because
Hmm.
it's so easy to look at somebody now
Yeah.
established in their career, you know, all of those iterations they've gone through and now they've settled on like their brand,
Hmm.
and it can seem really intimidating for people starting out.
Hmm.
But if you can go back and see sort of where they came from, it's like now you can relate to them. You can be like, that's
Yeah.
how, like, I feel like I'm where they were. Now look at where they've gotten to. And that journey becomes more possible, I think.
A hundred
Too
percent.
many times we only put our best stuff out. And a lot of times people now will go back in their past and they'll start deleting stuff because they want to like
Yeah.
preserve their identity a little bit. And I'm like, don't do that. Like, keep it out there, make it to
Hmm.
where like people that admire you now and want to, they sort of aspire to be
Hmm.
like you in some way, like
Hmm.
give them a path to follow and hope there rather than just this like mountain that they're looking at with no path forward.
100%. And I'm so glad you said that. That is actually huge because yeah, I used to do that too. Like it was, seeing people that was creating like this amazing work. It was like, man, like were you born with this? Like, like did
Right.
it just
Right.
did it just come out like where you started? But no, it's huge, man. And honestly, I have work, and even when I talk to some creatives or definitely creatives who are just starting, I always want to try to show them like something I've done way back when. If it feels like it's kind of where they are now, but you need that. Like it's just a point of reference. Like you just gotta know, like nobody started running before they actually took their first step. Like
Yeah.
you have to see that footprint and to say like, okay, now at least I know if I'm in this realm or in this ballpark, at least I know I'm on that right path. And now I just gotta choose to continue to walk down that path because I think now the space has become very polished and I'm guilty of it too, is where we're seeing so much of the final product that it doesn't seem like there's any imperfections anywhere. I
Right.
can really appreciate a creative's or even just a studio's work when they can show me the draft that failed. Like,
Yeah.
show me the one that you almost threw away. Like I want to see that one and see like what your thought process was at that time because then that holds so many answers. Like you can see like the initial draft, but you can also see the mistakes, and then also it's just as clear as you can see the solutions. It's like, all right, I found what was wrong within this. Now I know that it may not be for this specific project or the specific piece that I'm working on, but now in the next one, I can just add that technique. The next one, I think about this principle. The next one, I know not to go down this road for this, and then over time, like rinse and repeat, you start to realize you start to like really back away from the early mistakes that you have because you'll be able to see it like so early before you even like start. And it's definitely when you're actually in the business of selling, especially like when it comes to like branding. So when you think about like discovery sessions and questions that you ask and interactions with clients, like you start to do it so much you realize, okay, I need to make sure I covered this space because last time I didn't, and I had to kind of guess or go back and ask and things like that, which that's normal. It happens. But I think specifically to this case, like being able to see that or have a log of that and being more transparent with that is so helpful, especially with the new generation of creatives that coming in. Like they're coming in a very unique time where it's like everything around you is a creative or everyone around you is creative versus back then you had to discover the creatives. Like you had to literally go deep dive and say, oh, I love that, who actually made that, and find it. But nowadays, like you're not only just seeing the work, but you're seeing the creative with it. But but no, I'm glad you said it, man. That's huge, man. That evidence alone is already a game changer to anyone. So for the young creators that listen to this podcast, please, please, please do not take what you see today as what was happening when they first started. I promise you, for illustrators, that first sketch sucked. For designers, their first logo sucked. So if you have a patience and then just continue to use it as a point of reference, just keep trying it and just practice. I know you probably hear it a lot, but practicing literally makes perfect. Like it will, you may not hit perfect, but you're gonna get close.
Oh
You'll
yeah.
get close.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you were doing then, and I love what you're doing now, and the journey you've been on is really amazing and encouraging and inspiring.
That's
All right,
awesome.
so this I know I'm sort of late to the
Yeah.
game on this, but congratulations, man. I know it was a year ago, a little over a year ago that y'all got married, right?
Yeah, it was last October. We actually celebrated our first year anniversary last month. So yeah, that's my partner right there. That's
Well,
my
congratulations on that. And I'm gonna move through this slide quick because I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this idea of y'all being partners. What exactly does your wife do? It seems like she's an illustrator as well, or a creative as well, at least. And then I'm gonna pull up this thing because I also want to talk about the fact that you have done or y'all have done stuff with Adobe on the
Mhm.
Adobe Lives. So talk through sort of like y'all's partnership.
Yeah.
What exactly does your wife do? And then talk through some of these opportunities that you've had.
Yeah, so shout out to my wife, Alexis Washington. She's definitely my partner in crime, partner in life, and everything. But no, she's a creative too. So she's a designer, more art director, and on the strategy side. So she's been like huge, and in my journey, just being able to kind of be that person over the shoulder, saying like, "Hey, you need to think about this," and really challenging my ideas and just working everything. So she's definitely been huge in my career, and she's she we worked alongside of other projects and things as well, and she's been huge in just helping brands like strategize creatively. So she's been able to do that, and yeah, and we actually we have a really great relationship with people over there at Adobe Live, and we actually had the opportunity to interact with them at Creative South, which is a creative conference that happens in Columbus, Georgia, every year annually. So shout out to Mike Jones and them. And we went there, and we got a chance to kind of connect with the community, and we got a chance to be a part of just the kind of the Adobe Live team and everything else to kind of showcase new products, and it just allows us to kind of really showcase the creativity using their work because Adobe's a lot of tools, like it's a lot of techniques and a lot of like just things that we use. So being able to share that with them and also kind of bring this kind of level of fun because she's by nature she just has very energetic. She's very passionate about a lot of things, especially when it comes to what she does. So her being able to bring that energy to Adobe kind of like lights it up, and of course she has her own lane. So we typically tag team on projects, but she has her own kind of own set of, of clientele and things that she work on, and we just kind of use each other as a free resource to be like, hey, I need your eyes on this. Can I get some free consulting?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Um,
I loved just the energy between the two of y'all in this live that y'all were doing. I mean, obviously y'all seem to have not just a relationship, but really a genuine friendship that y'all seem to enjoy. And from what I
right.
understand, y'all's relationship sort of started from her being a fan of your work. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny, and I love like hearing her tell the story. But yeah, we got connected. We were, love made through a hashtag. So
That's
we
awesome.
yeah, we were this was actually the time I was getting back online and sharing work, and she reached out, and we she had some really kind words, but I was super appreciative, and we just stayed in contact. And at the time I was talking about getting independent. One of my first clients that I ended up having was actually in her area. So I was like, hey, I'm actually in, around the city, let's, connect and just kind of talk shop, and the rest became history. And now we're, doing Adobe Live, live together every now and then.
That's awesome, and I love the fact that this piece that y'all are sort of working on in this, she says at least, and I think you at least didn't disagree with her that this piece is inspired by her, and you even mentioned before that a lot of your pieces are inspired by the people in your life that you
Yeah.
interact with, and it seems like she would be a great inspiration for a lot of your characters. Sorry, I'm trying to say caricatures. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that'd be the right term or not. So
No, you got it. You got it. Yeah, she was definitely she was my first muse. So she was the one that was like, oh, I like that. Let me draw that real quick. Stay still. But yeah, she's definitely inspired a lot of my pieces. Honestly, you can see the correlation here with just the ponytails and everything else here. Um,
definitely.
and she does give me a lot of pointers to make sure, like, like, hey, if you're gonna represent us or represent anyone else, like, make sure you do it appropriately and all these things as well. So she works as a amazing creative and art director to kind of like keep these in line. So people are seeing this work, and then granted, I appreciate the praise, but she's the magic behind a lot of the a lot of the pieces for sure.
I like it. I like it. Well, definitely. I know it's true for me, and it seems like it's true for you. Behind every great man is an even more incredible woman, right?
100% behind and beside.
Yeah, there you go. I like it. I like it. All right. So I do want to mention or talk about this a little bit. And I even see
Mhm.
this piece right over your shoulder there. It
Yeah.
does seem like your work, your art has more like depth to its meaning. Like
Mhm.
you seem to almost feel like a little bit of like responsibility to communicate more of a message than just a beautiful art piece. And I
Mhm.
see that right here in this piece, sort of a reference to a song
Mhm.
about an alien on MLK Drive.
Yeah.
But then you've got the quote, "It's all right to tell a man to lift himself by his own bootstraps, but it is a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps." Like,
Mhm.
I feel like that's something that, I mean, obviously, this is one of your pieces that seem to have like a heavy message with it.
Mhm.
But then also even the piece that you and your wife were working on, that was for sort of like what was it? It was women's. Was it just women?
Yeah, I think it
It
was like
was
National Women's. I think it was Women's Month, Women's Celebration Month, or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I feel like your art obviously carries some deeper meaning to it.
Mhm.
What do you feel like is the responsibility of artists or creatives to sort of like? Do you feel like that's a responsibility that across the board? Do you just sort of take that personal responsibility, or
Mhm.
is just like a message that you would communicate regardless of your art or not?
Yeah, as I'm like getting, of age and getting older, it's definitely become more of a personal responsibility. And I think back of just like what taught me and kind of what inspired me to kind of be where I am today. It's like there was always some level of truth in the things that I used to interact with. If we see it sometimes in movies or sometimes in shows or even the pieces themselves, there was always something that kind of tied back to life to some capacity that allowed me to not only appreciate the work that I was looking at, but now I can kind of take this message or this interpretation and kind of filter it through my life specifically. And now that there's a generation behind me, I'm referencing like my nephews and nieces as well. Like, and they're coming up in the world. Like, I'm starting to see like, okay, it's not enough for them to just have something that they see and enjoy looking at, but now, like, what is an opportunity that you can learn? Because I can't necessarily go and teach everybody everything. I can only just kind of share what I know. But I think there's a level of curiosity that I think we can kind of tap into, that even if we don't necessarily teach it directly, we can introduce them to the concept of certain things. So for this one, for me, I'm a huge fan of the song. So the song is with Smino, who's an amazing artist, and he had this like kind of short song talking about MLK, and I think it came out at that time. I think it was like it was actually on MLK Day that it came out. But I love the concept of it because I think it was like a little bit of an educational piece where it was obviously fun. The music video was very creative, but it also kind of like to me shows how unique MLK was, to society. Like his point of view and just like the challenging times that he was in, it kind of made, to me, how I interpret it, it kind of made him more like an alien. Like, who is this person that's able to become a appointed leader and really shape society and lead the civil rights to this world that that probably would seem foreign to people way back then today. Like, I'm thinking, like, if my granddad or my great granddad was to like come back and have a life today, he was like, what is happening? Like, this is nothing like I was here. So I think for that, in that interpretation of that, or at least the way that I interpret it, I thought it was super unique. And I think, like, how do we kind of take that message and pull it in, but not necessarily have it dominate the piece? Like, let's build the attraction. Let's have people love, what they're actually seeing. And of course, I didn't keep other people too much in mind with this. I wanted to kind of like just have something that challenged me creatively. But for people that can come in and look at the piece and be like, okay, I love this piece, but also have like this nugget to say, all right, now when I'm learning about this or learning about anyone else, I can recall this piece. And sometimes it becomes like kind of almost like a study guide. It's like I can like use it as a reference, like, oh, I remember this piece, so I remember this person, and then I remember what this person meant to the world. Which to me, again, is not that's not a primary thing for every piece that I work on or everything that I do, but if I see the opportunity, I at least try it or at least propose it to allow that educational side and that really important message to bleed through. Because in the long haul, as we're looking back on some of this stuff, I want to make sure there was some type of intention, and we're not just making for the sake of making all the time.
Yeah. Well, and I recall back to my childhood and the cartoons I used to watch, even
Hmm.
talking about Doug. I mean, there was always oftentimes, let me put it that way, there were oftentimes deeper meanings and
Yeah.
especially in how we should treat each other
Hmm.
or even touching on social issues. There was a lot of that in the 90s with the cartoons.
Hmm.
So I mean it's really neat to, I think nowadays people don't consume the same kind of media that we did.
No.
Oftentimes
No.
it's Instagram, oftentimes it's YouTube, oftentimes it's TikTok that people are consuming it. And I do
Yeah.
think there is a level of responsibility, or maybe responsibility is less of the key word and more of an opportunity for
Yeah.
creatives to add that extra like meaning and
Hmm.
message to what they're saying, to sort of continue that aspect of teaching the next generation and sharing those truths that sometimes are hard truths
Hmm.
to deliver, but then you can deliver them in such a creative way that not only is it effective, but also it's sort of long lasting because it sort of
Yeah.
imprints in your mind with something like this that's so visual. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. And art, I mean, and art just has so much power to control like time. Like, um, it's funny. I was listening to someone say, like, when you dig through history, everything we understand about history always ties back to the art of that time. Like, we can interpret how people were thinking, what actually was happening in the world through through the art. So even as like a responsibility, like, it's not even just for now, but like you thinking like 1,000 years from now when they're digging up the dust and they're
yeah,
going through old hard drives and files, and for whatever reason they see like this working, they're like, all right, now I see this. What does this tell me about the time that the people were living in? And I think it's kind of it's like a none like self-provoked, I guess is the best way to describe it, like responsibility that artist ends up having on them, um, that they don't realize is how huge it is when it actually becomes a thing in history, where like the society, the times, the people, the cultures, the religion, everything is tied back to the art and the way that the art represented that time to tell us everything that we need to know about today.
yeah. I've always said, because I used to teach history, and in the
Hmm.
midst of history in middle school and high school,
Hmm.
we would always study art, and I always sort of talked about that art does two things. It reflects a culture. So you can
Hmm.
look at art and study the culture, but then
Right.
it also turns around and influences the culture. And so you can
Mm.
actually see art. I mean, I think of music, especially like
Yeah.
how much music reflects the culture of the artist and of the community at the time, but then how much of that music also turns around and influences the culture and shapes it and molds it. You know, I mean, so
Exactly.
it's in so many ways it's an opportunity, but also a responsibility.
100%.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about your like what advice have you gotten, or maybe that you would give to people? What would you say to people that are just beginning in the creative space, or maybe in illustration specifically?
Oh man, there is so much that I can tell you. Man, if so, I think if I was to tell someone that's getting started today, I think I would say try as much as you can, say yes as much as you can, say yes with boundaries, of course. Um, but I think it's try as much as you can, like because I think we're in a space where there is creativity all around you, and you're going to see people who may feel intimidating. You may not feel a lot of encouragement. You may not feel like a lot of you may not feel motivated to do a lot, but try as much as you can, and really just open up your horizons, because creativity, like people, especially early on, you kind of it's very easy to fall into what feels safe. And nothing is nothing wrong with that. I think if you enjoy something, to do something, but I would encourage someone to just to try different things at least once, or just a little bit every now and then, to open up your horizons, that kind of make you a better creative. And probably even a deeper one that I would share is like, don't ignore how much of regular life influences your creativity. Um, One hard lesson I learned was that, I was always go to my desk and try to think of a bunch of ideas, or try to come up with something. But some of the best things, or at least in my opinion, some of the best ideas that I ever had was the result of actually living life. So
Hmm.
if you are someone that can get around and travel, or if you can, go outside, hang with people, have conversations, get um, get intrigued by things that you wouldn't normally go search for. Like if you typically watch, like, let's say if you like watch a lot of YouTube, go find a channel that you wouldn't normally watch. Go learn something that you probably wouldn't normally go learn on your own, like intentionally, and do that as often as possible, and like really become a nerd about different things. And you'll be shocked at how much that can influence your creativity. And that's with anything that you're trying to do. Like, we see art and creativity in so many different realms. Like, it's funny, I watched the other day, like this guy was making these unique liquid videos. I don't know if you saw it, but like he was like dropping liquid, and it had like this weird reaction, creating these patterns and stuff. And like that's intriguing, but it just reminds me so much of like if I was studying science, or learning, science things, or seeing things like that. That can fuel a lot of that. So I think for anyone who's really starting is try as much as you can. Don't limit yourself too much on what's actually out there and what's possible, because you really don't know. You really won't know what you're good at until you actually get through the bad part of trying something. Like your first things are always going to suck. Like it's
Yeah.
it's just inevitable. Or at least not to be up to par to what you may expect from yourself. But if you can get past that, and get past that from the first like 7 to 10 times, you'll be shocked at how great you'll be at certain things. And then, again, just allow yourself to live as much life as possible, to again fuel your actual creative ideas, because you never know, like the smallest instance, and small instance, that leaf that falls on the ground, that conversation you overhear on a plane, or that, you know I don't know, that music tone that you might hear walking past a jazz bar. Like, you never know what that's going to spark, and you can always recall that and say, okay, I remember this moment in time. This can be a great, formula for whatever it is that I'm working on creatively. And then over time, you start to see how much of your work really reflects the life that you are, trying to live.
I like it. I like it. Definitely get out, live life, but also try new things, right? Especially
Absolutely.
in the creative space. All right. So, what's next for you? What's next for Fuzzies Co? Where are you going? What big projects do you have coming up? Aspirations? Any of that?
Yeah, so I mean, thinking blue sky, we're definitely going to continue continue to grow. And I'm currently actually working on a few pieces. It's funny, working on them as we speak, to start sharing out. And we're really, I took a little bit of time away to kind of re-strategize and kind of rethink the brand fully over the past couple of months. But we are definitely going to come back and try to introduce more products into the space that people can continue to have and really enjoy on their personal time. And then ultimately, we want to try to move into education, man. We want to really start doing something that helps parents out, to allow them to have just another source or source of truth to, have the kids either occupied. Because I know with like, parents, especially parents of newborns, I know that life is moving a lot. So if we can kind of play a part of like a distraction, or and of course like a distraction in a good way, that's kind of what we want to, scale to. And then, down the road, we're gonna try to move into a series, man. We would love to get into an animated series where we can really bring these characters to life, give them real life adventures and dialogue to allow them to be, their own universe. And I think that's just something that I dream about. I think it's definitely going to happen. It's not a matter of if, but only when. And really, hopefully, have Fuzzies build its own legs, and I can kind of like step back a little bit and allow just the creative juices to roll through it and really become hopefully another Doug down the road.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I know. I love that, man. I love the idea of an animated series. That's really cool.
yeah,
The educational opportunities that are potential for this is huge. I mean, even like you said, like some type of way in which you can help out young parents,
yeah,
or even just communicate those meaningful messages that you're already communicating, but maybe in a way that's tangible and in
mhm,
homes and in the hands of parents and kids. So
yeah,
props to you on all of that, man. It sounds like you've got some good direction you're moving in. Obviously, you've got a
hmm.
strong base already with the Fuzzies,
Thank you.
and I definitely will be following along and look forward to seeing that journey, man.
That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah. So, all right. So, this is sort of what I always wrap up with. Who
Mhm.
inspires you? Who have you sort of looked at before, and you've been like, man, they where they are, that's where I want to be, or and that could be in anything. Or who is it that you work alongside that you feel like just pushes you to
Mhm.
be better, do more? Even just like pushes your creative juices to that next level a little bit.
Man, man, this podcast would be 3 days long if I went through everybody that inspires me. But no, if I had to pick out a few, one would definitely be my wife, Alexis. She pushes me creatively a lot. She doesn't allow me to be static on anything, or take the short road out. So she's always like, nope, go back, go try it again, try it again. Um, but she's definitely a big inspiration on kind of a daily basis. Early on, like we talked about before, my brother was a huge inspiration, still is. Huge inspiration on just like, having me think creatively and get introduced to things that I wasn't familiar with. It's funny, every time I see him or hang out with him, I'm always getting introduced to a new sound of music, or, something completely different, whether it's food or anything. So definitely keeps me fresh with a lot of like new things. Sometimes my clients are definitely inspiring, just kind of to see them build up their dreams and build up their brands and everything else, and allow me to kind of play a small role into that. It's definitely inspiring. So having conversations with them, talking to them, working with them through their challenges, and learning from them, just kind of like seeing like things that they don't do, has been super inspiring and helpful. And then just people in the space that inspired me over time, man. One in particular that stands out was a Day Hogue, who, rest in peace, unfortunately passed a couple of years ago. But he was a really big inspiration to me coming into specifically the design space. He was a very talented, creative, and designer out of, I believe, from North Carolina originally, but he's out of Chicago. But seeing him kind of grow and scale himself and become like this positive light in the creative space, kind of like opened the door for me a little bit wider, to know that it was kind of like almost permission a little bit to like, all right, this is the kind of person I want to be. If not, try to do more. But yeah, Daeho, he was definitely was a huge inspiration early on when I was, getting into. So but yeah, I can go on, and of course, shout out to my one of my first jobs, the agency I was with. All those guys was there. They was pushing me in a way that I think if I hadn't pushed myself, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So all of them combined, and of course, everyone that I've had a chance to at least have a conversation. This conversation is inspiring. Like, this being able to
Just
talk to the
yeah,
friends.
add Brian Pope to that
Yeah,
list. No, right?
exactly. You're on there. You're on
No, no.
there. Those are all those instances, and whether good, bad, or neither, it's just they play a role in inspiration. But those people specifically stand out, and um, I give credit to. I know that I wouldn't be where I am if they wasn't around. So definitely though.
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful for those people that inspired you and continue to inspire you because your work is incredible.
Thank
Again,
you.
I really look forward to sort of seeing where it goes from here.
Mhm.
But Hank, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, man. I mean, it really is an honor of mine to sort of hear and be able to share your story on here. And again, I just really admire your work. I love the niche you sort of chiseled out for yourself, and just how adaptable and how much of a great message carrier your work seems to be. So
That's
props all
awesome.
around, man.
And same to you, man. I'm a fan of the podcast, and definitely an honor of this. So, and salute to you, man. Being able to give creatives this time to really share the story, I think is going to help a lot of people that listen. So, if anyone's listening, we show this out, is they'll make sure you go subscribe and follow this podcast. I know I definitely will.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, man.